My partner of 5 years was writing physical letters to my best friend. I found out from an envelope in a drawer. What I found when I started looking was a parallel story that had been going on longer than I imagined. There are everyday objects that, when you find them in an unexpected place, produce a question you cannot not ask. Not because the object itself is extraordinary, but because its presence where it is has no immediate explanation that closes the question. The envelope was in the drawer where we kept household documents, lease agreements, utility bills, appliance manuals we never read but keep anyway. And among those ordinary things, there was an unsealed envelope addressed to a P.O. box, with Marcos's handwriting, with a return address that was his name and that postal address, which meant Marcos had a P.O. box I did not know existed. And that envelope was a letter that had arrived there and that he had brought home. My name is Camila. I am 31 years old. I am a freelance graphic designer, and I have lived with my partner Marcos for 3 years in an apartment in the Roma neighborhood. Marcos is 33 years old. He is an editor at a cultural magazine. We have been together for 5 years. He is a person who reads a lot, who writes well, who has the kind of sensitivity that gives cohabitation texture and depth. Those same qualities that had attracted me to him were what gave what I found afterward its specific weight. My childhood best friend's name is Valentina. She is 32 years old. She has lived in Monterrey for 4 years. We have known each other since we were 8. 33 years of friendship that had survived different cities, different relationships, the successive versions of the two people we had become. Marcos and Valentina knew each other. They had met through me. They had always had a cordial relationship of the kind people have when they know each other, because they share someone important. Or so I thought. I did not open the envelope that day. What I did was stand looking at it for a moment and then put it back in the drawer. And I spent the rest of the day with that presence somewhere in my head that did not let me be completely in anything else. That night, I asked Marcos whether he had a P.O. box. He asked me why I was asking. I told him I had seen an envelope with that address in the drawer. Marcos said yes, that he had opened a P.O. box a while back to receive work correspondence, that some publishers still sent materials by physical mail. The explanation sounded reasonable, and it would have closed the question if the return address on the envelope had been a publisher. It was not a publisher. It was handwriting I did not recognize and an address in Monterrey. I said nothing more that night, but the question did not close. The following day, when Marcos left for work, I opened the drawer. The envelope was still there. I took it. I examined it. The envelope was sealed. The return address handwriting was handwriting I did not recognize. But the address was in Monterrey, where Valentina lived. I did not open it, not because I did not want to know, but because opening someone else's correspondence is a line that, even in that moment with that question vibrating in me, I did not want to cross. What I did was photograph it, the return address, the zip code, and search whether that address corresponded to any place I could identify. The return address was for an apartment in Monterrey. I searched through old conversations with Valentina to see whether she had ever given me that address. Yes, it was her apartment. I spent 2 days with that information processing. Before making any move, I wanted to be sure of what I was looking at. I did not want to build a conclusion on a single piece of information. I reviewed backward with the attention of someone looking for something specific. Had there been moments where Marcos had mentioned Valentina in ways that at the time seemed ordinary, but that with this new information took on a different color? The answer was uncomfortable. There had been conversations where Marcos had asked about Valentina with an interest I had interpreted as the genuine interest of someone who cares about the important people in their partner's life. There had been a moment 2 years ago when Valentina had visited the city and the three of us had gone out to dinner, and the dynamic between Marcos and Valentina had something I had noticed without naming. A fluency, a way of talking that suggested they knew each other more than shared occasions explained. There had been messages from Valentina in recent months that at the time had seemed slightly different in tone without my knowing exactly what made them different. All of that took a different shape with the envelope in the drawer. I decided to talk to Valentina before Marcos, not because I wanted to create an alliance or a problem between the two of them, but because Valentina had been my best friend since I was 8 years old. And if there was something I needed to understand first, it was what existed between them from her perspective. I called her on a Saturday morning. I started the conversation ordinarily, and at some point, I asked her directly whether she had been in correspondence with Marcos. The silence that followed was enough. When she spoke, she told me yes, that she was sorry, that she had not known how to tell me. What Valentina told me in that hour-long call was the hardest thing I have processed in 33 years of friendship. She told me it had started 2 years ago, that at the dinner where the three of us had been together, Marcos, and she had had a conversation at the end of the night when I had gone to the bathroom that had been different from the ones they had had before. That in that conversation, Marcos had mentioned that he sometimes wrote letters by hand, and that it seemed to him a form of communication he missed. That Valentina, who also had that sensitivity toward handwriting, had said she would like to receive one. That Marcos had written to her, that she had written back. Though it started as an exchange about literature and about life, had gradually become something different. I asked her what that exchange had become. She took a while. She told me that in the letters they had talked about things they did not talk about with anyone else. That there was an emotional intimacy in that exchange that over time had taken on a dimension neither of them had known how to name or had known how to stop. I asked her whether there had been anything physical. She told me no, that they had never seen each other alone, that it was only letters. I told her only letters was enough. I hung up with Valentina. I stayed in silence for a time I cannot measure. What I felt was not only anger. It was also something like grief. Grief for the version of my relationship with Marcos I had believed I had. Grief for the version of my friendship with Valentina I had believed I had. Both things at the same time, in ways that could not be completely separated. I talked to Marcos that same afternoon. I told him I'd talked to Valentina, that I knew about the letters, that I needed him to explain it from his side. Marcos did not deny it. He told me he was sorry, that what had started as something innocent had grown in a direction he had not anticipated and had not known how to stop, that there had been nothing physical, that mattered to him even if he understood if, for me, it was not enough. I asked him whether he had fallen in love with Valentina. He took too long to answer. He told me he did not know, that there was something there he did not know exactly how to name. That answer was the most honest and most difficult of the entire conversation. I did not make an immediate decision about the relationship. What I did was ask Marcos for the letters to end, that if there was something he needed to process about what he felt toward Valentina, he process it honestly with me and not in a secret exchange. That if what existed between them was something he could not or did not want to let go, he'd tell me. Marcos said the letters were going to end, that what had existed with Valentina had been a space that had filled something he had not known he needed and that he now needed to understand what that said about us. That honesty was harder to hear than a denial would have been. With Valentina, the conversation was different, longer, more painful in a specific way, because 33 years of friendship carry a weight that a 5-year relationship does not in the same way. I told her what she had done had harmed me in a way that was not only about Marcos, that it had harmed me as a friend, that she had taken something from what existed between us, the trust we had built in 33 years, and used it to build something different with the man I lived with, that was a specific betrayal that went beyond whatever happened with Marcos. Valentina acknowledged it. She did not defend herself. She told me she knew what she had done had no justification that made it right, that she had chosen something she wanted in that moment over something she should have protected. 5 months have passed. Marcos and I are still together, in a couples therapy process that has had more honest conversations than the ones we had before all of this happened. I do not yet know whether what we have can sustain what came out. What I know is that the honesty with which we are both navigating this is the only foundation from which I can evaluate whether it is worth continuing. With Valentina, I have not spoken again, not because I have decided the friendship ended definitively, but because I need time to know what I want to exist there, if anything. That time has not yet ended. What I want you to take from this story has 2 parts. The first is about emotional infidelity. The letters between Marcos and Valentina involved no physical contact, and yet they produced harm that is not lesser than what something physical would have produced, because what they shared in those letters was real intimacy, real thoughts, real emotions. a real connection that existed in parallel to the connections each of them said they had with the people in their lives. Emotional infidelity is real, even if it is harder to define than physical, and it deserves to be named with the same clarity. The second part is about betrayal between friends. Marcos's betrayal was of one kind. Valentina's was of another. And even though both are part of the same story, they carry different weights for me. Because Valentina was not just someone I was with. She was my best friend since I was 8 years old. The person with the longest history with me of all the people in my life. And that person had built something with Marcos in a space that used the intimacy we had as its context. Had chosen something for herself over something that belonged to both of us. That is what I still process when I sit in silence with this story. If this story touched you, comment. Do you think emotional infidelity is as serious as physical infidelity, or do you believe there is an important difference between the two? Like if you believe betrayals between long-term friends are a specific kind of pain that deserves more space in conversations about relationships. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who is processing a betrayal that involves more than one important person in their life at the same time. Reflection to take with you. The intimacy you build with someone in a long relationship is not only yours to share with whoever you want. It is a context that exists between two people. When one of those people uses that context to build something with a third person without telling you, they're taking something that belonged to the space between the two of you. Naming that is not being possessive. It is recognizing that intimacy has a value that deserves to be treated with care.